Hey everyone, I'm Tom McMahon. I'm just a college football fan with no particular uh, insider kind of insight. I'm just a fan. I live in Georgia, and I like to talk about college football. Unfortunately, ESPN and all the talking heads kind of get on my nerves when it comes to this kind of stuff, talking about the upcoming top 25 because they just endlessly speculate, and so I figured I'd just put this on the online, even if there's just a handful of us that view it. You can leave comments. I'm not trying to monetize this or anything of that sort. Like I said, I'm just a fan talking about something, trying to think through this and see if I can get some other fans out there to do the same with me. And what I'm doing is I'm basing this off of last week's top 25. And this committee, I have to hand it to them. In that first week, they came out with one of the more logical uh, top 25s I've seen any of these committees do. And I'm not saying I necessarily agree with every team's placement, but they did come up with logical. They were very careful to painfully point out that head-to-head matchups really matter to them. And so that's one of my big assumptions is that they're going to continue to do that. And my other big assumption for this week in particular is that so many teams struggled this week that I don't think any one team is going to get penalized for that. I think it's going to be just there's Georgia. Of course, everybody knows they're going to be number one. They haven't struggled at all against anybody, and I kind of doubt they're going to. But we'll go ahead and get started on. We'll talk about Georgia when we get there. Start at top 25 or at 25 and work our way up. I think Texas, San Antonio, still undefeated. I know they're in the Conference USA, and the Conference USA is dying even as we speak. They're losing so many teams to these other Group of Five conferences as this realignment really hits the Group of Five conferences hard, especially Conference USA. They're trying to regroup now. But Texas San Antonio is still undefeated. I think this time they'll actually be rewarded by the committee and be put into the top 25. At 24, I think Purdue now has two big wins to their name this year. They probably deserve to be in the top 25, may even come in higher than this. I don't know. I did put them at this point for a reason. Again, this committee seems to be very particular so far about head-to-head matchups and about what teams' records are, especially when comparing teams within conferences and that kind of thing. So I'm thinking Purdue will be 24th. We'll see. 23rd, San Diego State. They were 24th last week. They'll nudge up one spot. I think they continue to look pretty good. They like a lot of teams. They did not look that impressive this last week. Very few teams did, but I think they'll probably continue to edge up a little bit. 22, Arkansas had a pretty big win. They seem to have recovered. They went through their big winning streak at the early part of the year. Then they lost. Georgia destroyed them, and it took them a couple of weeks to recover. I think now they're getting back to playing top 25 kind of football again, beating Mississippi State. So I think they are bound to be in there somewhere. I'm picking them at 22. Pitt is 21. Again, they actually did have a pretty good week this week, and I think they're still sort of on pace probably for the ACC championship game. So we'll see if that plays out for them. At 20, Auburn, of course, lost to Texas A&M. They were ranked a bit higher than that in the last poll. I don't think they'll fall too far because Texas A&M is a ranked team after all. And so I'm thinking that they'll slide to 20, and I'm picking that based on the following team, which Penn State, I'm putting at 19. Penn State wasn't ranked at all, but because they won, because they're now 6-3, and because they beat Auburn, I'm assuming, as with last week, that these head-to-head games really matter to this committee. Auburn and Penn State now have the same record. Penn State should vault into the top 25 and be ahead of Auburn because they beat them. Barely, but they beat them at home. So I think that they will move up quite several spots. And the Big Ten is so crowded at the top, you can literally have a team be out of the top 25 one week and then just pop right into the top 20 somewhere the next while another team falls out. Just depends on who wins. Iowa, 18th, a little bit ahead of Penn State. Again, you're seeing I think the Big Ten probably has as many or more teams in the top 25, and they're very good. They're top heavy, but they're very good at the top. Wisconsin now Just when everybody was writing them off a few weeks ago for being overrated, not looking good at all at the start of the year, suddenly they're playing the way that most people thought they would play, and now they seem to be cruising up into the top 20, now maybe the top 15 before it's done. We'll see. At 16, North Carolina State. I have nothing against State. I'm 55, and for most of my life, I've seen North Carolina State flirt with having good football teams every now and then. And just when you think that they're going to actually do something, they always lose. And, I'm not wishing that on them or anything, but I have no confidence that North Carolina State will continue to do what they're doing. They're one of the more unpredictable programs there are, period, in college football. 15, Baylor, losing, but I don't think they'll drop too far. If there's such a thing as a good loss, it wasn't a bad loss. Let's put it that way. And Baylor still has a chance to play their way back up into things. Although I don't know that they're as good as Oklahoma and Oklahoma State. I think they're a little bit behind those. We'll see. 14, Ole Miss beat Liberty this week. Not a gigantic win, but again, given how rough a lot of other teams looked, Ole Miss cruised along about as expected, I think. Actually, a little bit more of a defensive game than I think most people thought, but they're looking pretty good for 14 this week, I think. BYU been quietly having a really good team all year long, really solid. Of course, they're moving up into the Power 5 here in a few years when they join the Big 12. And frankly, they've been beating several Power 5 teams already this year. They're really already there, and the 13th rank, I think, will show that. Wake Forest, of course, lost to North Carolina. I don't think this could be, the committee could drop Wake Forest lower than this. It depends on what they really think of them. Obviously, the defense is not there, but the offense is pretty good. I just don't think that they're going to fall very far yet. Now, if they lose one more game, they'll fall almost out of the top 25, I think. But so far, if they can hold it to one loss, and again, that was not a conference loss for them. That weird thing that they in North Carolina did, that wasn't a conference game yesterday. So they're still on pace to make it to the championship game as well. 11, Texas A&M finally seems to be settling down into the team that everybody thought they would be at the start of the year. That took them several weeks. That upset win against Alabama, I think, finally turned things around for them. They played a solid game with Auburn and won it. Now I think they've even got themselves into a pretty good position to maybe even make it to the SEC championship game if Alabama were to lose to Auburn, especially at the end of the year. Oklahoma State at number 10, they're kind of the Big 12 version of North Carolina State. Just when I think they're going to do it, they always manage to lose. And they always have a hard time getting over the Sooner hurdle. But we'll see as time marches on this year whether they can do that or not. Number 9, Notre Dame's quietly just inching up. Got a good team. I don't think they're going to go much further than that. They and Cincinnati are kind of joined in this little combo that they've got. As long as they both keep winning, they both keep helping each other. But Notre Dame, of course, will not be able to get ahead of Cincinnati if the committee does what it's been doing in week 1, and they continue to do that as the weeks progress. Oklahoma was idle. I think they'll stay exactly where they were in last week's poll. Michigan won pretty handily. Not the most impressive win, and I think they'll probably stay at 7 where they've been. Mainly because the biggest upset, of course, if you want to call it that, and it was Michigan State losing to Purdue. It'll be interesting to see how far Michigan State drops. I'm thinking they're dropping to 6th. And again, that Michigan State, because State beat Michigan, I think that's why we'll end up with that particular pairing, Michigan at 7, Michigan State at 6. They're not going to drop below Michigan, and I don't see Michigan dropping themselves. So I think 6th is probably the logical place for Michigan State to end up, and that means Cincinnati moves up to 5. Of course, Cincinnati has not looked good over the past few weeks. Being group of 5, everybody is always scrutinizing them for any kind of weakness. The American is not particularly a good conference this year. It's been better. Cincinnati really needs to begin to show themselves what they're capable of doing. They are a top 10 team, but they want to be a top 4 team and make the playoffs. They got to do better. They lucked out this week because everybody else kind of looked shaky too. So they'll move up one spot. That's going to be the highest spot any group of 5 team has been at. It'll be interesting if the committee does not move them up or moves them down. That's a really bad sign for Cincinnati, but I think they'll climb up to 5th. 4th with Ohio State. Okay against Nebraska. They're still, they deserve to be where they are, as does Oregon, because Oregon beat Ohio State. They're going to be 3rd. Some people, I think, are saying that Oregon may move even ahead of Alabama at number 2. And, that wouldn't surprise me. Could happen. Doesn't really matter. 6 and 1, half dozen of the other. Alabama and Oregon 2-3. Doesn't matter which way it goes, really. Alabama, probably the only team that would have a chance against Georgia this year, and that's only if Alabama brings their A game, which Alabama brings the A game for about 2 quarters and then brings out their C game for about a quarter or a half. They can't do that against Georgia. They can do that against most other teams, but Georgia, as this year goes on, I just think Georgia, like last year, as the year went on, Alabama just was obviously better than everybody else. This year, Georgia, I think, is just obviously better than everybody else. And it's kind of their year, I think. Georgia's one of the top 15 sort of all-time programs, sort of in the 10 to 15 range as far if you were to rank the programs throughout time. And those teams tend to win national championships about every 40 years or so. And Georgia's very reliable. They won one in the 41, won one in 80. Look like they're going to win another one here. Unless they do something to hurt themselves, I just don't see them losing to anybody. They're that good this year. They have no weaknesses at all. And even before Alabama lost, I thought Georgia was still better than they are. And it's like Georgia's number 1, and you might as well say everybody else is just, throw them up in the air and see where they land. I just don't know if it's going to matter. I think Georgia will just roll through the SEC championship game, through the playoffs. I don't see anybody beating them. I know I'm going to probably stress out Georgia fans by saying that. I love those SEC shorts about Georgia and Hope. If you haven't seen those, you need to watch them. They're funny. But this year, I think the hope is justified. They are just iron solid team, and I hope they win. I'm a Georgia fan. I'm more of an Alabama fan traditionally, but living in Georgia, I think it'd be great if they won the national championship. So go Dogs and all that. Anyway, if you have any agreements or disagreements, or leave a comment if you like, and let me know what you think of the committee so far, because I'm always curious about how the committee as a group thinks, and I actually like the way this committee is going so far. We'll see if it holds. Thanks for listening.